Have you ever tried a small spiritual ritual hoping it would change your money situation, only to wonder whether the real change needed to happen inside you? Have you ever noticed that the moment you treat your home like a sacred space, your life starts to feel clearer, lighter, and strangely more possible? Welcome back to the channel, my friend. Today we are going to talk about something that sounds almost too simple to be taken seriously, and that is exactly why it becomes such a powerful mirror. A lot of people say that if you place salt in a sacred place in your house, money starts flowing, opportunities open, and luck improves. Some people swear by it, some people laugh at it. But if we slow down, the deeper story is not really about salt. The deeper story is about intention, awareness, cause and effect, and the way you treat the space where you live in, the mind you live inside. Because your home is not just where you sleep. Your home is an amplifier. It amplifies your habits, your moods, your relationships, your discipline, and the invisible patterns you repeat every day. And those patterns shape your destiny more than any single lucky charm ever could. So let me tell this like a story, because the best way to understand a ritual is to see what it does to a person, not just what it promises. There was a time when Mara felt like money was a wall she kept hitting with her forehead. Not always dramatic poverty, not always absolute crisis, but that constant pressure that steals your breath. Bills arriving like clockwork, paychecks disappearing like water on hot pavement. One surprise expense turning a normal week into panic. And under all of it, a quiet belief she hated admitting. Maybe I am just not meant to be stable. Maybe I will always struggle. Maybe life is built to squeeze me. She worked hard. That was the cruel part. She was not lazy. She was not careless with everything. She tried to be responsible. But her mind was exhausted. And when the mind is exhausted, it starts making choices that look small but have big consequences. Ordering convenience food because cooking feels impossible. Scrolling late because rest feels unreachable. Saying yes to people who drain you because conflict feels too costly. Avoiding paperwork because it triggers anxiety. Procrastinating on important planning because the future feels like a threat. This is how financial suffering often works. Not only through a lack of income, but through a lack of inner steadiness. And that steadiness is not a personality trait. It is a practice. One night Mara was at a friend's place. Not a fancy place, just a calm place. Her friend had a way of making the room feel soft. There was nothing extravagant, yet everything felt intentional. The air felt clean. The surfaces were not cluttered. The lighting was warm. Even the silence felt organized. Mara found herself breathing deeper without trying. That is when she realized something painful. Her own home did not feel like this. Her home felt like a battlefield. Not because it was violent, but because it was messy with unfinished choices. Laundry piles, unopened mail, random objects with no place, corners she avoided looking at. And when you avoid looking at your space, you are training yourself to avoid looking at your life. Her friend noticed her staring into the quiet. Mara said, "How do you make your place feel like this?" Her friend smiled and said something that sounded almost silly at first. "I treat it like a temple. Not in a religious performance way. In a respect way. And sometimes I use simple things to reset the energy. Like salt." Mara laughed a little. "Salt?" Her friend nodded. "Salt is ordinary, but it is also pure. It absorbs. It preserves. It reminds you that small things can carry meaning when your intention is clear." I place salt in a sacred spot as a practice. It is not a vending machine for money. It is a ritual that keeps me awake. Mara wanted to dismiss it, but she was tired of walls. She was tired of panic. And here is an important moment in any transformation. When a person is tired enough, they become teachable. So she asked, "What do you mean by sacred spot?" Her friend said, "The place you choose to represent your highest values." For some people it is an entryway because it is where you welcome life in. For some, it is a quiet corner because it is where you return to yourself. For some, it is the kitchen because it is where nourishment happens. The sacred place is not about superstition. It is about focus. Focus is power, and power changes outcomes. Mara went home later that night and stood at her doorway. She looked around like she was seeing her place for the first time. The air felt heavy, not because of ghosts, but because of her own unresolved stress. She could feel it in her shoulders. She could feel it in the way she sighed before even taking off her shoes. She thought about the idea of a sacred place. The phrase sounded big, but the action could be small. She decided to choose a simple spot near a window where morning light came in. It was messy, covered with random items. She cleared it slowly, not in a frantic cleaning spree, but in a mindful way. She wiped the surface. She opened the window for a minute and let fresh air enter. She put one small object there that reminded her of calm. Nothing expensive, just something meaningful. Then she took a small bowl and poured salt into it. And here is the key. She did not pour salt while thinking, "I demand money now." She poured salt while thinking, "I am done living in confusion. I am choosing clarity. I am choosing order. I am choosing honesty. I am choosing wisdom over impulse. I am choosing compassion over fear." Because fear makes money feel like an enemy. Wisdom makes money feel like a tool. She placed the bowl in that spot and sat down. At first, nothing magical happened. No lottery ticket appeared. No miracle check arrived. No sudden promotion. And that is good, because the real miracle in spiritual life is rarely instant cash. The real miracle is the shift of mind that changes what you do next. Mara woke up the next morning and saw the bowl of salt in the light. Something about it felt simple and steady. It reminded her of her intention. It reminded her that she had chosen a direction. And that direction created a small pause before her usual habits. Normally she would grab her phone and start scrolling. But she paused. She looked at the bowl. She remembered. Clarity. She made a cup of water. She opened her mail instead of avoiding it. She did not fix everything in 1 hour, but she stopped feeding avoidance. She took one bill and set up a payment plan instead of letting fear grow in the dark. She looked at her bank app without flinching. She wrote down her actual numbers, not as punishment, as truth. Truth is a sacred thing. Truth is the beginning of freedom. Over the next few days, the bowl of salt became a symbol. Every time she walked by, she remembered to return to her values. And values are not decoration. Values are choices. Choices are seeds. Seeds become harvest. This is karma in plain language. Not mystical. Not dramatic. If you plant avoidance, you harvest chaos. If you plant clarity, you harvest option. If you plant discipline, you harvest stability. If you plant compassion toward yourself, you harvest steadiness instead of burnout. So Mara kept practicing. She cleaned one small area each day. She created systems so her space stopped becoming a dumping ground. She began to treat her home like it mattered, which is another way of saying she began to treat her life like it mattered. Then something interesting happened. Because when you create order in your environment, your mind often becomes more ordered too. Not instantly, but steadily. She started sleeping earlier because the room felt calmer. She started cooking more because the kitchen was not overwhelming. She started feeling less scattered because her space was not constantly shouting unfinished tasks at her. And with that calmer mind, she began to notice opportunities she used to miss. A co-worker mentioned an opening for a better role. In the past, Mara would have thought, "I am not qualified," and she would have shut down. But now she felt a small confidence. Not arrogant confidence, but grounded confidence. The kind that comes from keeping promises to yourself. She applied. She also found an old subscription she had forgotten about and canceled it. Small money, but it felt like reclaiming power. She called her internet provider and negotiated a lower rate. She set a weekly money check-in. Not obsessive, just consistent. Consistency is a spiritual practice. Now, if someone asked her, "Did the salt earn you money?" she would not answer like a salesman. She would say, "The salt reminded me to stop leaking my power. The salt reminded me to be awake. The salt did not print money. It changed how I moved." And how you move determines where you arrive. Weeks passed. The bowl of salt stayed in its place, and once in a while she replaced it. Not because it was magical, but because the replacement ritual became a reset moment. A moment to recalm it. A moment to release old heaviness. A moment to cleanse the mind of bitterness and fear. Because bitterness is expensive. It costs you energy. It costs you creativity. It costs you relationships. It costs you the ability to keep learning. Maura began practicing compassion in a new way. Not the soft excuse kind. The honest kind. She forgave herself for not knowing what she did not know. She forgave herself for past mistakes while still learning from them. She stopped calling herself stupid for struggling. She started calling herself a person in training. Training is awakening. And as she changed inside, her outer life began changing too. Not as a fairy tale, but as cause and effect. She got an interview. She prepared carefully. She practiced answers. She slept early the night before. She walked into the room with a calmer nervous system. Not because she was furious, but because she had been practicing steadiness every day in small ways. She got the role. More income did not instantly solve everything, but it created breathing room. And breathing room gave her space to keep practicing. She paid down one debt. She built a tiny emergency fund. She stopped living in constant crisis mode. Now, here is where the spiritual lesson becomes even deeper. When money pressure eases, the ego often returns with a new trap. It says, "Now you can relax your values. Now you can spend to celebrate. Now you can show off. Now you can prove yourself. Now you can chase status." Maura noticed that voice. She recognized it as the same restlessness in a new outfit. So she returned to her sacred place. She looked at the bowl of salt. She remembered the real goal was not simply money. The real goal was freedom. Freedom from panic. Freedom from compulsive choices. Freedom from self-sabotage. Freedom from the inner prison of fear. She decided to treat her new income as a responsibility, not a lottery win. She used it wisely. She helped her mother with a bill quietly. She donated a small amount to someone in need. She bought groceries for a neighbor who was struggling, not to be praised, but because compassion is part of abundance. Abundance without compassion becomes greed. Greed becomes suffering. This is another karmic principle. When you hoard, you tighten. When you share wisely, you soften. A softened heart makes better decisions. A tightened heart makes fearful decisions. Fearful decisions create more fear. So the ritual of salt had done its real work. It had turned her home into a teacher. It had turned her daily life into practice. Now let me speak directly to you. Because maybe you are watching and thinking, should I try this? If you try it as a superstition, you might be disappointed. If you try it as a practice, you might be surprised. The practice is simple. Choose a place in your home that you decide will represent your highest intention. Clean it. Not perfectly, just sincerely. Place a small bowl of salt there. Then do the most important part. Set your intention clearly. Not "I want money now." Instead, something like this. I choose clarity. I choose discipline. I choose gratitude. I choose compassion. I choose wise action. I choose to stop feeding the habits that keep me poor in mind and poor in options. Then let that bowl become a reminder. Every time you see it, ask yourself, what seed am I planting today? Am I planting avoidance or honesty? Am I planting impulse or wisdom? Am I planting resentment or forgiveness? Am I planting fear or courage? Because money often follows the person who stops self-sabotaging. Money often follows the person who becomes consistent. Money often follows the person who treats their life with respect. And even if money does not change immediately, your inner peace can begin changing right away. That inner peace is already wealth. Now I want to offer one more layer that matters. The sacred place is not only about attracting, it is about cleansing. Many people carry emotional clutter that leaks into their finances. Old guilt makes them overspend as self-comfort. Old shame makes them avoid looking at numbers. Old resentment makes them reckless. Old grief makes them numb. So when you place salt in that place, you can also use it as a moment to release. Release does not mean denying reality. Release means letting the past stop controlling the present. Say quietly, I release the habit of panic. I release the habit of avoidance. I release the need to prove myself through spending. I release the belief that I am doomed. I choose a new pattern. That is spiritual work. And spiritual work changes destiny because it changes behavior. Behavior changes outcomes. Outcomes create new condition. New conditions give you new choices. New choices create a new life. Now let me share a reflection from the kinds of stories people tell when they try something like this. Some people place the salt and nothing changes externally for a while. But they notice they argue less at home. They feel calmer. They sleep better. They start cleaning. They start budgeting. They start praying. They start taking responsibility. Then months later they realize they quietly became a different person. The kind of person who naturally makes wiser money decisions. Other people place the salt and suddenly they get a job lead, or a client, or a refund they forgot about. That can happen too. Because when you become attentive, you notice openings. When you become calmer, you communicate better. When you become consistent, people trust you. Trust creates opportunity. Again, not magic, cause and effect. And here is the final truth I want you to hold. Whether salt is spiritual or symbolic, the real sacred place is your attention. If your attention is scattered, your life becomes scattered. If your attention is trained, your life becomes trained. If your attention is compassionate, your life becomes gentler. If your attention is wise, your destiny becomes steadier. So yes, place the salt if you want, but more importantly, place your intention. Place your practice. Place your compassion. Place your discipline. That is how the inner fire of prosperity begins. Not as greed, but as clarity and capability. Thank you for spending this time with me today. Now I want to hear from you. Have you ever tried a simple ritual that surprisingly changed your mindset? Have you ever noticed that cleaning your space and setting intention made your life feel more open? Share your story in the comments so other people can learn from real experience, not just theories. And if you want to support the channel, subscribe, like, and leave a comment so these teachings reach more people who are searching for stability and peace. If you want to go deeper, consider becoming a member so we can keep building this space together. Until next time, stay awake, stay compassionate, keep practicing, and remember that the most powerful sacred place is the one you create in your own mind.